On today's show, this wasn't a collapse. This was the Capitals being shown loudly and painfully exactly how far they are from being the NHL's elite.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Caps falling to the Avs in some afternoon action. Is anyone surprised out there? I'll talk about that a bit later in the show. We'll talk about discipline, not talent, sank the Capitals in the final segment. Charlie Lindgren was outstanding, and it didn't matter. When you take a look at the final box score, it would be easy to jump to the conclusion that Chucky did not play great. Quite the con. But just here, the Capitals didn't collapse. They were exposed again. And I'm trying to come to you guys surprised that the Capitals, wow, they lost another game. And I understand the lay of the land here. They're playing the league leader in points, the Colorado Avalanche, and all the offensive firepower that team has. And when you take a look at the box score, and just an example of how far apart the Capitals and Avalanche are right now. Nathan MacKinnon, this isn't a typo, 10 shots on goal, 2 goals scored in this game. There were 3 other players on the Avalanche to get 5 shots on goal. This was a masterclass, and just proving evident that it's not an accident. It's not like, wow, that Avalanche team just got lucky. No, it's a team that has truly great players. It's coached really well, and they buy into the systems that are laid out by the Avalanche. And I'm not saying the Capitals have never been a team. In fact, they were pretty darn good last season, right? But you're just kind of seeing the disparity, the differences between the two teams. And, you take a look at the little things that are the big things. Colorado out shooting the Caps, get this, 44-24. It is just, I just can't believe it when I take a look at it. It's just like how and why do we keep going down these same roads again and again? So let's just talk about this game that we saw in some afternoon action as the Capitals start their trip out west. This one in Colorado and Denver there. And the Capitals didn't collapse. They were exposed. And that's the part where I think we should start, because there's no dancing around it right now. The biggest takeaway from this game this afternoon is the Capitals didn't melt down. They got exposed by a team operating on a completely different level. And it's the star players, right? And it's evident as that we know that we're out Wilson. You saw Sortive come back. We know that Pierre-Luc Dubois is out. And I understand the significance, but we are more than a Wilson and a Pierre-Luc Dubois from being competitive. Now, look, the Avalanche, they're not just good. They are historically good right now. Colorado right now is on a 130-point pace. They basically have turned Ball Arena into a house of horrors and skate like a game and make it seem like it's on fast forward. Did you get that feeling like everything was moving quick and the Capitals were a step or two late? And according to NHL.com standings data, they've lost 1 regulation game at home all season. 1. So to say that the Avalanche are a wig in this team would be an understatement. So when the Caps came out one of their best starts in weeks. That actually caught my attention that, you saw the Capitals get on the board. It was a nice goal by Chychrun on the power play, but from the blue line, that was a really fist pumping moment. And Ethen Frank, making the most of the opportunity. There was a skirmish behind the net and he was hanging out near the net front and made the most of that opportunity. Good things to take away from this game. They drew penalties early, controlled play 5-on-5, and they didn't look immediately overwhelmed. And like I say, Jacob Chychrun still riding a high with that new dad strength, was right in the middle of all of it. And Chychrun, huge on the blue line and has been huge offensively, scores on the power play, his 18th goal of the season, tying Zach Werenski for the most among NHL defensemen. That's not a typo, and that guy is here. We have the makings of a great team, right? That's elite level production from the blue line. And something that the Capitals have had in the past. John Carlson is good. You remember Mike Green was really good. Chychrun is definitely in the conversation and stirring the drink as one of the best offensive defensemen in the league. But, when I talk about that, when I talk about the Chychrun, when I talk about that is where my optimism ends. And I hate to come to you with a negative note, but it's where we're at. Because even during this good start, you could already see the margin. Colorado didn't panic after going down. They just waited, and eventually Parker Kelly tips a Cale Makar shot. Suddenly the Caps are chasing again. And that's the theme, right? How many times, wash, rinse, repeat, carbon copies, rubber stamp it, have I come to you guys talking about a Capitals game with a similar outcome? Moments of greatness, but overall disarray. And that's the theme right now. This team is always chasing. Because for me, the problem isn't the loss. It's the expectation that the Capitals cannot compete against some of the best in the NHL. And at times, even struggling against teams that are not the best in the NHL. And that's the killer here. This felt a point of the game. And that's not because the Caps played awful. It's because Colorado never stopped being who they are. And that's a terrifying realization if you're trying to measure where the Caps actually stand. And, to be Captain Obvious here, those are the kind of teams, that you're going to have to beat if you want to make a deep push into the playoffs or dare I say a Stanley Cup. Because like I said, off the top of this segment, the Capitals got exposed again. It's not a new story. It's something that I've come to you guys with for like the last month or so. And again, all the banging of the drum, all the people talking that we need in Washington, we need help. We're too fixated on the future to worry about the present. And that was made evident, right? That Chris Patrick was probably at the game and maybe Brian McClellan was with him. And when they leave the room up in the press box, they still have to feel that feeling of defeat. The thing that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is why is he not trying to do something? This cannot continue. And the game that we saw this afternoon was evidence of truly an awful team that's trying to dig its way out. All right, so coming up here after the break, discipline, not talent, sank the Caps. Straight ahead. There is nothing like being near the ice during the hockey season. The speed, the hits, the atmosphere, it's unmatched. Watching at home is great, but being in the building is a completely different experience. The only thing that used to get in the way was actually getting tickets, long queues, endless screens, and prices that change at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NHL tickets and experience. The app is incredibly easy to use. Browsing and buying tickets it's one of my favorite features is seeing the view from my seat before buying, so I know exactly what I'm getting. And that's why I went to a Capitals game this season, and that is the exact reason why I used Game Time. Ease of use, and I could see the view of the ice before I bought the ticket. There's so much to love. I know you'll love it as well. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't done so already, go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. That address again is lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. You get access to an ad-free feed of Locked On Capitals compatible with Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. An invite. Members only Locked On Everyday Club Discord server, which also includes a group chat just for listeners of Locked On Capitals. That's where I'm going to be. So go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. There's also a link in the show notes. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps28. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. Before I go any further, before the break there, I said an awful team. And I want to add clarification. This is still my favorite hockey team. I guess what I'm trying to say, so no one has a negative takeaway, is the play right now is awful. I'm not saying the team is awful, but I don't think any of us can argue with the fact that what we have seen from the Capitals for the last month or so is just awful. But diving in here to segment number 2, discipline destroys momentum. That the Capitals did start off on the right foot. I mentioned that as much. And there was a feeling like, wow, are they going to be able to do this? Are they going to be able to beat the best team in the NHL? Wow. I know it would only be one win, but wow, the momentum, the feather in your hat of taking down the best team currently in the NHL, that would have bolstered this team's confidence to no end. But it was not the case. So let's talk about it here in the second segment here, talking about discipline, not talent. Sank the Caps this afternoon. And here's kind of where I get annoyed. Because the takeaway I want you to take is the Capitals sabotaged themselves with penalties and sloppy details, and elite teams don't forgive that. You also saw Ryan Leonard with reduced ice time. You saw Hendrik Slop here with a bit more ice time. That, if you want, a baptism by fire, it's playing the Avalanche, as they have firepower galore. Like I said, the Capitals had momentum early, and then the second period hits, and it's just penalty after penalty, hooks, trips, high sticks, including a brutal double minor. And what are you going to have? What's going to happen when you have all of that firepower and you commit multiple penalties? Well, the proof is in the pudding, and if you want to take a look at the box score, it explains the whole story. Nathan MacKinnon scores on the tail end of a double minor because, of course, he does. And honestly, that's the best phrase, skill gapping. MacKinnon doesn't just beat you. He humiliates your structure. Elite is what I'm going to say. And like I talked about off the Capitals, they just didn't have the answer. And when you have firepower like on Avalanche, you're exposed. And it's not just one play, right? It's not just MacKinnon. There's Makar. That there is many different players on that team that are just waiting for you to take a misstep. Victor Olofsson makes it 3-1 by crashing the crease completely untouched. No box out, no answers. That's beer league defense, in my opinion. And, you take a look at the blue line. We've talked about John Carlson in his future. We know that this is his last season under contract, that, John Carlson's good, and Sandin and Chychrun are good, but I still think that we need an upgrade. That's why I've stood pat. We need 2 forwards and a defender to be a better team, right? Not a Colorado Avalanche, but to be a competitive team. We are more than just one player away from being really good. But give credit where credit's due, because the only spark the Caps had came from a line nobody expected. You saw Ovechkin, Dowd, and Ethen Frank. And when Dowd got hit to the ice, and I thought that Ovechkin was going to throw down, that was one of the moments, hold my beer, I want to watch this. And right, that line worked. And Ovechkin threads a gorgeous pass. Frank buries it 17 seconds later, and suddenly there's life. There's life. Ethen Frank, a feel-good story of this season for sure, buries the puck. And that was the moment that I thought we might be able to do this. Frank now has 5 goals in 6 games, and Ovi quietly has 22 assists. 18 of them are primary. So, Ovechkin is still a contributor, even though this Capitals team is not playing some of its best hockey. You take a look at the players and kind of the tertiary. You talk about Frank and sort of before, but Ovi getting involved with assists as well, primary assists, that there are positive spots on this roster. That's playmaking. That's evolution. Because that's what we need Ovechkin involved as well. Because Ovi always has more goals and assists, and this season, not so much. But here's the issue. That spark didn't change anything. That the beginning of the movie and the ending of the movie were already written. It was just the part between the beginning and the ending. That is the part that changes. But it seems like as of late, the ending is, well, you know how the ending has been. The Capitals still enter the third period trailing again. This team lives in scoreboard deficit mode. I don't think it's a conscious thing, of course, that they're trying to put themselves in that position, but that's the position that they put themselves in, that we need to claw our way back in here, and maybe we'll get back in there. You have Spencer Carberry doing a challenge, and it actually worked for the Capitals this time, but guess what happened? The Avalanche scored shortly thereafter. And the air was let out of the balloon and out of the Capitals locker room. And eventually you run out of legs, ideas, and belief. And for right now, you got to think that Spencer Carberry is fresh out of ideas. He has mixed and matched and done every possible line combination that he possibly can. Again, we need upgrades, or we need Hershey call-ups, or we can expect, more of this. Copy, paste down in the schedule. Because, you take a look at the schedule coming up, it is going to be a rigorous road trip. I think we could circle that one as a win. Maybe we could circle that one. Same goes for the Flames. Oilers is going to be tough. A lot of firepower there. And the Kraken is kind of a toss-up for me. So the Capitals do have an opportunity to turn this around. The Canucks, the Flames would be an excellent opportunity to bank up some points there, but those are no give-me's, right? We don't want to go into those with trap games, but big picture here, it's the same story again and again. Discipline destroys momentum, and ultimately the Capitals started off strong, and the discipline, the mismatched assignments, the difficulty getting out of their own end, it all came into focus yet again. And things that they need to work on before they take the ice next time. All right, so coming up here after the break, despite the final score, you would think to yourself that Charlie Lindgren did not play a great game, but Lindgren was left alone. Why is this always the case? I'll discuss next. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. You can also find us on TikTok. It's at Locked On Capitals. All right, in the final segment here, we're talking about Lindgren left alone. That if you want to talk about the biggest bright spot, I guess I'm going to say for me, the goal scored, of course, is kind of, the things that really stand out, Frank and Chychrun. Wow, goal scored. But Lindgren, the backup netminder that hasn't played in a bit here, really stood tall against an Avalanche team that has a tremendous amount of firepower. And I don't want this to go unnoticed because it's easy to get lost when you look at the final score. But Charlie Lindgren, left alone, exposed, kept the Capitals in the fight, despite what you saw in the final box score. So let's talk about that here in the final segment, because Charlie Lindgren was outstanding. Yeah, I said it. I'm planting my flag there, and it didn't matter. And this is the part that hurts the most. Charlie Lindgren gave the Capitals a chance, and nobody followed him through the door. We see that in these games, that there's one player that tries to lift this team on their back and carry them across the finish line, but it can't be one person. It can't be Charlie Lindgren or Logan Thompson. It can't be just Ethen Frank. This needs to be a collective. This needs to be winning by committee, a team, if you will. He has 38 saves on 43 shots, multiple breakaway denials, robbed MacKinnon, robbed Brock Nelson, robbed Martin Necas on the doorstep. That, the Capitals, have had the luxury of having two truly great netminders. And you think to yourself, and I think that to a certain extent we take that for granted, that, Logan Thompson, he's going to be in the Olympics representing Team Canada. But not to be lost in this is Charlie Lindgren. Charlie Lindgren on any other team in the NHL would be a starter. I really do believe it. And I remember what I said. I mean, is he an elite netminder? I wouldn't say he's elite, but he is still one of the best. Braden Holtby-ish, that is elite in my opinion. Charlie Lindgren is a game changer for the Capitals. And again, I don't want any of that lost in the loss today, because he did what he could do and saved many pucks, many shots that many other netminders around the league would not have made. And yes, finally, a goalie interference challenge that went the Capitals' way. A miracle in and of itself, right? The Capitals have been absolutely snake-bitten this year when it comes to coaches' challenges. But even that only delayed the inevitable. Colorado gets a 2-on-1. Lehkonen scores. Then Rasmus Sandin fumbles the puck behind the net, and MacKinnon makes it academic. And what am I saying here, right? That, you talk about the fast forward. It seems like Colorado plays with the fast forward button pushed down. And guys like Sandin and Carlson, and we saw different players, Ryan Leonard, they were exposed that Colorado is a really fast team, and they were not ready. Shots in the third period. Get this, Colorado 17, the Capitals 3. Why? I mean, you're playing a good team. I get that, but that's only going to go so far. You're still an NHL team. That's not being unlucky. That's being out of gas completely. And I think that it was difficult for the Capitals. Of course, Colorado's really good. They're not, just an okay hockey team. They're a great hockey team. But you talk about the power play and the different things like that. The power play is the worst in the league. They haven't won back-to-back games since the beginning of December. We're starting to enter into the back half of January here. Key players are slumping. Depth players aren't dependable. And the skill gap against true contenders is massive. That when it's Ethen Frank and when it's Justin Sordiff and it's one of these secondary and tertiary guys, when those are your saving graces, when you have the likes of Ovechkin and Wilson when he's healthy, these kind of guys, then I think the problems are much deeper than they appear on the surface. Because you looked at this one, I did a short for YouTube. This was one of the games that I had, circled as the Capitals losing, surprise, surprise, and they didn't disappoint. What it was a scheduled reality check. How bad are we right now? That's how bad. And again, I hate coming to you guys, talking to you about losses. I can't tell you about them winning, right? It was an ugly loss by this team. I hope wholeheartedly that I can come to you like I have done for the last 4 seasons, before this, and lots of good news. But it has been a lot of doom and gloom surrounding this team. They're out west now. Late puck drops, same problems, same questions. All of you that live in Eastern time, these are not fun games because the games wrap up, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And if you have a 9 to 5 like I do, it makes it pretty difficult. So yeah, stay up past midnight if you want, but don't be shocked if the results feel familiar. Because right now, this team is losing a lot of games, right? And, I think that Vancouver, I think that Calgary, I think those are 2 games that they should win. Should is the operative word. But with that said, those teams are still playing for pride. right? They're still playing. We got the trade deadline coming up here in March that, if their current home, whether it's in Vancouver or Calgary, they're looking for what's behind door number 2, wherever that is around the NHL. So don't think it's going to be a walk in the park on any of these games, right? Whether it's against Calgary, whether it's against Vancouver, and really, having to bring your A game when it comes to playing teams like the Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid, and all the firepower that is on that team as well. So it's not going to be easy, nor should it be, right? That if this team has plans of greater things, and Lord knows I hope they do, then these are the kind of games that they're going to have to win. They're going to have to beat the Avalanche. They're going to have to beat the Oilers. They're going to have to beat the Golden Knights. And they're a far cry. There's a far gap between the Capitals and the Avalanche and the Capitals and the Golden Knights. And the question, the frustration for the Capitals, for Chris Patrick, is how to close that gap. And because that's the hard part. Are we resigned to the fact that this season is a wash? Are we already planning for the post-Ovechkin era? I'm not ready to give up on this team yet. All right, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You, as a matter of fact, make the show so successful. And are you one of those that watch or listen every day? First of all, a tip of the hat to all of you. I love all you guys. Yeah, I said it, love. I don't care. But I have something that's just for you. It is the Everydayer Club. Go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. That's lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. What do you get? You get an ad-free version of this show. It's available on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to it right now. You also get access to the Discord access. There's one specifically for Locked On Capitals. And if you join the All Access insiders for the Everydayers there, you also get access to texting. We can text back and forth on my phone to your phone, talking about the Capitals, plus exclusive podcasts with exclusive guests. There's so much to love. LockedOnCapitals.supercast.com. For those of you on the video side, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure and make your second listen NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holmi, and I'll talk to you again next time.